Welcome to Billionaire Capital. Look, if you're tuning into this explainer, you're probably already a high performer, right? You're climbing that corporate ladder, earning a fantastic living, and playing the game exactly how we were all taught to play it. But I want you to picture this scene for just a second. Imagine a highly paid, super successful executive. They're waking up at 5 a.m., dreading that grueling morning commute, totally stressed out about quarterly reviews, office politics, and hitting KPIs just to scrape together a year-end bonus. Now, cut to the elite asset owner. They're waking up at 8 a.m., casually checking their portfolio's growth over a quiet cup of coffee, and completely dictating their own schedule for the day. That right there, that is the stark, cinematic difference between earning and owning. So today, as your mentor, we're going to bridge that gap. We are going to absolutely shatter a very comfortable, very pervasive illusion about how you actually achieve world-class, elite wealth. Because you've been sold this narrative that if you just work harder, climb higher, and stash away your paychecks, you'll eventually reach that top tier. Well, today, we're rewriting that narrative based entirely on the cold, hard reality of how the ultra-wealthy actually operate.
0%. Just let that sink in for a second. It is a staggering reality check. If you take a step back and really analyze the Forbes 400 list, the definitive annual ranking of the richest people on the planet, guess how many of those titans made it onto that list purely off a high salary or earned income? 0. Literally none of them. In fact, a lot of the ultra-wealthy actually take a legally required salary of just $1 single a year. Why? To avoid income tax almost entirely, letting their underlying assets do all the heavy financial lifting. You see, you can follow all the traditional rules of money. You can save a massive chunk of your paycheck, you can grind incredibly hard for decades, and you could easily be the single most valuable employee in your entire company. But your salary, no matter how astronomically large it gets, is never ever going to put you in the elite wealth category. A salary is basically a false summit. It gives you this cozy illusion of altitude while keeping you completely tethered to the mountain.
And this brings us to the fundamental contrast of the entire global economy. On one side, you have the traditional trap, trading your precious, totally limited time for a wage. In this scenario, you're just constantly fighting the clock. Your earning potential is strictly capped by the 24 hours in a day and, frankly, your physical ability to perform. But on the other side, you have the elite reality. Taking a pen, signing a massive contract, and acquiring an asset that scales infinitely while you're literally fast asleep. So in this explainer, we are breaking down the exact hidden strategy the ultra-wealthy use to absolutely dominate. We're going to cover the unspoken law of money that controls the global economy, the distinct psychology of the people who actually make that Forbes list, and the exact strategic pivot you need to make right now to stop trading your time and start accumulating real power.
Okay, so this brings us to a universal truth of the economy. I call it the golden law of wealth, and it goes like this. He who gives the money has the power. It sounds incredibly simple on the surface, right? But internalizing this requires a massive, massive psychological shift. There's this fundamental law in the money game that dictates the person who gives the money completely controls the outcome. When you're the one holding the checkbook, you write the terms, you dictate the flow of capital, you absorb the tax advantages, and ultimately, you reap the massive, outsized rewards. But as long as you are the one receiving the check, whether you're the employee or the contractor, someone else is explicitly capping your potential to ensure their own profit margin. The elite wealth class, they operate entirely on the giving side of the equation.
So when we actually look at how the ultra-wealthy get to that level of control, the roadmap essentially splits in two. Path number one is build and sell. These are your brilliant, absolutely relentless operators. Think people like Mark Lohr or Dan Gilbert. They grind from the ground up, pouring blood, sweat, and tears into a massive business, and eventually sell it for a huge, life-changing payout. But look closely at the true, enduring titans of the global economy. They rely heavily on path number two, buy and build. While a few operators build and sell, the vast majority of billionaires out there are constant buyers and builders. Think about Warren Buffett, right? Buying up undervalued insurance companies just to use their float. Or Jeff Bezos acquiring Whole Foods to instantly secure a massive physical retail footprint. They aren't just operating a single business. They're actively using capital as a tool to constantly acquire existing assets and build absolute empires upon them.
Let's formally define what this actually means, because this right here is the absolute core of our strategy. Buyers and builders are individuals who create elite wealth by constantly acquiring assets, owning equity, and scaling companies. Now, look, I know that stepping out of the comfort zone of a predictable biweekly paycheck is absolutely terrifying. That deep-seated fear of making your first big purchase or your first major investment, that is exactly what holds 99% of people back.
But if you want to play at the highest level, you have to shift your paradigm. You have to evolve from an employee trying to optimize a salary into an elite asset manager seeking immense leverage. Because a buyer and builder isn't looking for a slightly better hourly rate or a nominal year-end bonus. No, they are looking to own the very machinery of wealth itself.
To really hammer this home, let's look at the sheer, asymmetric upside of buying. We have 3 wild historical examples here that completely prove how controlling the terms leads to infinite scale. First up, Facebook acquired Instagram for $1 billion. And at the time, critics called it a ridiculous overpayment. But today, that asset is worth well over $45 billion. Crazy, right? Then you have Google buying YouTube for $1.6 billion. It's now the world's second largest search engine. And over in sports, Mark Cuban bought the Dallas Mavericks for $285 million back in the year 2000, and eventually sold a majority stake at a $3.5 billion valuation. I really want you to think about this closely. There is no corporate bonus structure, no aggressive promotion, and absolutely no cost of living raise that could ever multiply your net worth by 45 times in a single decade. A salary inches up incrementally. Equity explodes exponentially.
Now, I already know the immediate objection forming in your mind. Whenever the concept of acquiring assets comes up, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, I don't have billions of dollars in cash right now to go buy tech companies or sports teams. Listen to me. You don't need it. You just need the strategy. The massive momentum starts the exact moment you switch your operating system from earning to acquiring. So start with 3 actionable habits today. First, audit your time. Stop treating your weekend hours as just free time and start treating them as your initial acquisition capital to research and build your foundation. Second, study leverage. Learn exactly how the wealthy use responsible, low-interest debt to buy cash-flowing assets rather than using high-interest credit cards to buy depreciating consumer goods. And third, start micro-acquiring. Whether it's purchasing a small, profitable online business, buying into a franchise, or even just investing in fractional real estate, just start. The massive scale will come later, but that habit, that has to be built today.
And this brings us to a hard, unyielding mentor truth. Remember this, your salary keeps you alive, but owning assets makes you free. I want you to truly, deeply internalize that distinction. The safety of a paycheck is exactly that, safety. It keeps the lights on, it pays the mortgage, and it funds your standard of living. But it is still a tether to someone else's terms. True independence, I'm talking about the kind of absolute freedom where you completely dictate your schedule, your geographic location, and your family's generational legacy. That only happens when you own the actual assets that generate the cash flow. Put simply, the salary is survival, the asset is freedom.
So stop earning and start owning. This is the ultimate dichotomy you're facing today. If you are finally ready to stop playing by the outdated rules of the middle class and learn how the top 1% really build their empires, give yourself a phased 24-month transition plan. Okay, here's how it works. Spend the first 6 months aggressively saving your capital and learning the core fundamentals of asset valuation. Then, spend the next 12 months hunting for and executing your very first leveraged acquisition. Something small, but critically, something cash flowing. Finally, use the last 6 months of that window to scale that asset's cash flow until it can reliably replace your base salary. This is exactly how you deliberately transition from optimizing a resume to optimizing a portfolio.
So I want to leave you with one final, very important question to consider. Are you going to spend your entire life working for a paycheck? You've seen the staggering 0% statistic of earners on the Forbes 400. You understand the fundamental difference between trading your time and acquiring equity. You have the blueprint, you have the mindset, and you now know the profound difference between the illusion of corporate safety and the reality of true financial freedom. The choice of how you proceed from this exact moment is entirely yours. Keep challenging the established rules, stay obsessively focused on the strategy of buying and building, and start assembling your empire. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.